Hey Brandon, how are you doing?
Hi, Jeff. Doing well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Well, thanks for joining me on Indispensable Appraisers podcast.
First podcast, so I'm happy to be here.
Ooh, I'm excited. First timer.
Yep.
Nice. Well, I'm sure you'll be a veteran. Hey, first question, what in the evaluation space, what are we doing right? What are we doing a good job at?
Yeah, I've listened to the podcast a bit, and I'll try and hit on some that maybe haven't been discussed as much. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of current trends or specific topics that we're necessarily winning at right now. But I think there are a few, we'll call it core functions of the profession that I think we're positioned pretty well in the long term. I think the first one's kind of our footing in the commercial real estate market. I personally went into valuation because I didn't want to be a traditional financial advisor, but I'm good with numbers. I knew I wanted to work in commercial real estate, but I didn't want to be a broker starting out. So commercial real estate valuation made sense as a good fit, and I've really liked it so far. So, the role of the appraiser is here to stay, whether that's due to mitigating risk, ensuring, an unbiased assessment or valuation, or because regulatory requirements, like we're not going anywhere. So I think that's a plus to start. I think the job itself and the personality of the people who work in the appraisal profession is a strength. It's not an easy job. I think all appraisers could tell you that. But there's something to be said about doing difficult work. It feels good to overcome a difficult task, especially on your own without, a team environment. I think a lot of appraisers work on their own a lot. So I think it creates a hard working lifestyle and individual. And that's something I always admired about appraisers, especially early in my career. So we care about our work, it matters to us. And that's, I think, always a good thing to have in your corner as a profession. So there's plus number two. And then the third one, which I think is probably the most important to me for the long term, is the ability to synthesize large amounts of data, but also a wide variety of concepts in every report that we put out there, or every product that we put out there. So I think, the talk of the town, big data, tech, AI, ABMs, they're going to continue their path in the commercial real estate market. And that's fine and well. But I think where we provide value is think about all the things that go into a traditional appraisal report, whether it's regulatory knowledge, intended use, highest and best use, economic insights, financial performance of the subject property. It goes on like tenant preferences, investor appeal, risk management. We do a lot that we put in one report. So that's impressive to me, not just being able to understand big data, but the number of concepts that we have to consider for every piece of real estate, every piece of real property that we appraise. So the ability to synthesize those concepts is what's going to keep us in the game, in the market. Um, and also you have to consider, we have a wide variety of clients. If you're doing bank financing, you might be talking to a chief appraiser or a reviewer who's clearly competent in understanding appraisal reports. But if you're doing stuff on the private side, you might be appraising something for a local business owner who just knows their business. They know nothing about real estate. So you might have to communicate to two very different clients. So the ability to do that is really important. So I think some of those things, footing in the market, the personality of people in the profession, and then synthesizing large data and wide variety of concepts. Those are the wins, I think. Might not be right now, and might not be able to see that right now, but long term, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, but appreciate that answer. That's a great answer, by the way. You mentioned synthesizing big data will keep us relevant. And you did mention AI, not to like double click on it.
Yeah.
I don't know your background on AI, but do you feel that the AI will come into play as a closed loop where you take an appraisal firm, even if it's a small firm, you take your data set, all
Yeah.
your comps, your rents, your just all your data, and that you use AI to hit your own data set to get better clarity. Or what's your take on AI? I mean, obviously you can write some neighborhoods and you can judge if it's even,
Yeah.
if it's actual,
Yeah.
or you can take let's say zoning, a very long zoning description off Muni code and have AI just summarize it. But what's your perception of AI as relative as a tool of how would you go about using it to maximize that?
Definitely. I think some of the low hanging fruit is what you already mentioned: neighborhoods, zoning. taking a lot of information, putting it into, quick, short, choppy paragraphs. I think where it comes into play is the appraiser is a storyteller. I think that's a lot of the value. It's like, great, there's a lot of data and we parse through the data and we make a chart out of it. But like, can you tell a story with it? I think that's where AI becomes a partner. It's like posing a question to AI, whether it's ChatGPT or whatever other models are out there. It's like, here's what I think this data is painting a story for me. Can you poke any holes in this argument? It's like having that back and forth, which obviously we can do with other appraisers as well. But getting on the phone, we'll get into this, but like we don't want to break up someone's workflow throughout the day. So just being able to have AI to kind of like a check for reasonableness with the story that I'm trying to tell with the data, I think that's an overlooked part of it.
Yeah, what a great answer. Thank you. Let's move on to what are our challenges in the valuation space?
Yeah, hopefully I provide a bit of a different perspective being on the younger side as an appraiser, especially in commercial. I'll do some non-conventional ones here too. First one's human connection. I think most of the appraisers I know made connections 15 plus years ago, and they're pretty content with the network that they have. And that's great for them. But what about the young people, the next people coming up? The same way humans thrive when we're part of a community with open arms, I think the same community is needed for the appraisal profession. I don't think we're getting a lot of that right now. The first few years I was in appraising, I only knew like 2 other young people, and it got pretty lonely at times. And I thought about leaving the industry because of that. So I've taken some personal responsibility to grow my network and connect with people. And now I feel like I have a collection of appraisers, young and old, that I can relate to, ask for help, and support them if they need help. So I feel a lot more confident that I can make a career out of this long term, but you do need the human connection. Second is education. I'm probably not going to be a fan favorite for this one, but the trend is towards online and asynchronous education, which is wrong in my opinion. I think at least half of your qualifying education should be done in person. That obviously won't happen given financial constraints of some of the education providers. But back to the personal responsibility point, I would offer that challenge to young appraisers: take half of your QE in person. Just the people you're going to meet, the professors you're going to meet, travel to a new place to take the course and make an effort to connect with other young appraisers or appraisers who are entering the profession kind of in that same career trajectory. You'll be glad you did it. I did. And I'm from Philadelphia. I traveled to Pittsburgh, traveled along the East Coast a little bit, met some great people while doing it. So those are the first 2. And then I think the third one, greatest challenge, is like the personal responsibility side. I'm hitting on that a lot, but I think we see across the board, just in life, we have pretty low levels of trust in like institutions in the US. And that's unfortunate, but you can only do so much complaining. So it's like with appraisers, I see a lot of whining, and I know deal volume's down and fees are compressed. And I know we've all heard this point, but there's a lot more to the profession than just doing bank financing work. So we talk about it, we beat the drum, but like, what are you going to do to make a change or a difference? Like, connect with lawyers, the accountants, financial advisors, realtors. They want to hear from you too. I mean, heck, maybe even make a couple cold calls, which I know is not normal to appraisers, but make some cold calls. Offer to go to some offices and like do a presentation to people without asking anything in return. I think being someone that you're a valuable resource is important, but take some personal responsibility. Grow your network, grow your client base. At the end of the day, you're responsible for your career and your relationships and the community that you build. So I think, that's an opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So.
Well, I love that answer. And I don't know if you meant to do this, but that's a real creative solution to join together education and networking.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of appraisers, because our education has been so stilted, it's been, USPAP every 2 years. I mean, I know that's continuing ed.
Sure.
But a lot of the education, even when it comes to the appraisal education, seems to be kind of set in fear. Like, make sure you don't do this, and it's got to be credible, and you could get in trouble. And as opposed to the opposite way, which is, especially for younger appraisers, here is a very good an appraisal. Here's a great format on a shopping center, and let's study that, as opposed to esoteric concepts, which I never liked, going through my education and probably, similar to you, and it's even worse online. But if we could actually say, here's an excellent way to appraise a nursing home. Here's an excellent, and actually go through here, you can take this back to your office, and I know it's like my secret format, and appraisers love their format. But I think, what does good look like? And if you don't show what is an excellent office building, DCF, multi-tenant, urban, 100,000 square foot office building, how should you go? What looks good?
Yeah.
What's the best way to do it? And I don't think we, it's like when you go to college, when you graduate from college, what can you do effectively versus a trade school? If I learn to be an HVAC guy, I can fix an AC. And I think when we go through our education, we have lots of concepts, but we can't even write an appraisal or to know this is an awesome multifamily appraisal or subdivision or whatever it is. So I like your idea of putting together education and networking. And it reminds me of, I'm part of a SaaS, software as a service entrepreneurial group. And what's really interesting, it's called SaaS Academy, Dan Martell, and we're now into their boardroom, which is next level. The amount of camaraderie of bringing together these SaaS software founders, it's amazing. And yes, there's content on the stage in person, to your point. We break out into roundtables. And even though these various founders do very different products, some are B2B, B2C, SMB, enterprise for myself, just the camaraderie of we're learning things, we break off for lunch, we break out for dinner and drinks, and we get to know each other. So yeah, I think changing what the education is and combining it with networking, that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, learning things together is fun too. Like being able to just bounce something off someone else while you're learning, or like professor makes a funny remark. Like, it brings people together. Learning's fun when you do it in a good setting.
Well, what you brought up, which I didn't think of ever, is I do view education as education. Like if I go somewhere, I'm
Yeah.
not thinking networking. But if you combine it and you purposely put together lunch, dinner, drinks, breakout sessions, roundtables,
Yeah.
peer groups, or 10-minute tactics where maybe you get up in front of the class and you present a 10-minute tactic that you think would be beneficial, whether it's productivity, efficiency, culture.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. So then you've kind of energized people to go, oh, this isn't just a class I have to sit through to get, credits. This is a class that I can't wait to go see Brendan at this next session in Philadelphia because I know he's going to be there. We met last year. He was pretty cool. Did my podcast. It was really fun. I'd like to get to know him. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that. So where do we go from here? I think you mentioned some really great stuff. Is there anything else then you're thinking that if you could influence the industry, and quite frankly, you are by doing these videos, because
Sure.
this is what I think appraisers really lack, is a voice amongst themselves with other appraisers and the real estate community in general, where we've kind of floated to the sidelines. And I think young people like yourself really we all need to step up and communicate and say, hey, we're still here. Like you said, when we started, we're still here. What would you do looking forward to improve our industry?
Yeah, I don't like, operating based on fear. I think there's a role for it, but one thing I'm definitely fearful of is like the next generation of business owners in the appraisal profession. I do see young people entering the profession, which is great. But what I don't see is the creation of small and medium-sized appraisal valuation consulting firms. It's really not happening. Um, I really see the opposite. I see the national firms eating up a larger share of the market, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there needs to be some sort of replacement generation of replacement small to medium-sized businesses, especially the medium-sized, because going forward, this is just my take, but I don't think the 1 to 3 person appraisal shops are going to thrive in the future. You need a little bit of scale. You need some people to create a culture. You need some in-person connection and the ability to create a business and have some roles for people. I think you need that to make people want to come together, work in the profession, and work in the profession for the long haul. I think all the small and medium-sized firms right now are run by people 45 plus years old. I think there's a real hole in the market for people that are running firms that are like 25 to 45. And what I think a lot of appraisers don't realize is we need young people running the ship, not in terms of being the chief appraiser. They don't need to be the chief thought leader for delivering appraisal reports, but they need to be guiding the business with some of these tech initiatives, business development, sales initiatives. You can have someone come into your appraisal firm that doesn't know appraisal. I know that's pretty unheard of, especially in a medium-sized or even a larger appraisal firm, but it would open some eyes. And I think just having some of that business savvy education is really important to keep the next generation of business owners going. That will be small and medium sized, which helps a lot of the secondary and local markets too. Small businesses are the heart of America. So that's my take.
Do you think that the challenge of the replacement of the younger generation creating small to medium companies is that lack of education of business in general, the tech, the process, the culture, that they maybe get into the industry and they don't really have their version of a SaaS Academy, something to look at to go, oh, wow, I could do my own firm?
I think that argument could be made to a lot of professional services, be it look at accounting or insurance. It's like, yeah, there's no real like business coaching or shouldn't say business coaching, but like business curriculum. I think that's true in anything. You have to make the initiative and go out and read some books and find a business coach or any of those initiatives. You got to do that yourself. And again, that's the personal responsibility part. But I do think that the tech, and I think the lack of points of reference in the appraisal industry, there's not a lot of young people running appraisal firms. So you don't have someone to ask or to model after or ask questions to or take out the coffee. So I think having good reference points, and that's what we're trying to do at Commonwealth Commercial Appraisal Group. It's like myself and my partner are, I'm 26, he's 32. So, I think we're bucking the trend. And hopefully if there's another young person that comes up, we can be a resource to them. But you need some type of funnel. And that's what I think we've been lacking. So, hopefully we get some momentum, but that's what I'm a little fearful of. And then the other one is, where we go from here is making valuation a desirable career path. I think it's a great profession, but burnout's huge. I think a lot of people are overworked. I don't think we understand our internal constraints. And to my younger appraisers out there, I know you want to impress your boss, and here's where like my Gen Z comes out, but like your mental health is really important. Take some time for yourself. Taking some downtime will make you a better worker. You'll come back stronger. So I say all that, like, don't be afraid to turn down a project. You might feel like you're at capacity. Don't be afraid to say no. No, but here's why. I think there's opportunity for more like a team style approach. It's like, yeah, I can't take this on, but maybe I can help with it with someone else. I think a lot of appraisers take things start to finish. Taking on a new appraisal can be daunting sometimes, especially if it's a little complex. So yeah, I think a more team oriented approach to appraisal firms and just getting away from the typical like hierarchy will help us as a profession in general. So I don't know. That's some of my takes.
No, great stuff. It's funny you mentioned burnout. We're having our quarterly session for my company, flying
Yeah.
everybody into town, lots of people. And getting back to your point about networking, connection, the human connection with people,
Yeah.
and to take the time to do that. And I do think that it's funny, I'm going to present one of the breakout sessions. We call it a founder session. So I'm talking about burnout, but I'm really talking about live-work balance, which some of my employees have brought up quite a bit. They're great. They're A players. They're all lighthouses, but you can get to a level of work to where, it does feel excessive, especially for appraisers. Even though I'm talking about more software, client success, CS, dev people. But I think there's one thing that's massive that people forget about the burnout factor, especially for appraisers. They tend to put their head down, they crank out appraisals, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's been such a huge change, which I think people just accepted so quickly and moved on, that the human connection is really lost because of remote work, right? So now you're in charge of your schedule, you're in charge of your human connection. You're in charge of your time management. And that is hard for, especially if you're learning appraising, you're trying to learn the industry and the product, and you have to be self-sufficient because there's nobody around you to ask, like you mentioned. So I do think that's to your point about education, is to train people, whether they're working remotely, but to keep that human connection. So I think it actually gets harder with the remote work, even though it gives you the flexibility. You have to monitor the headspace of your people, and you have to meet every so often. And once a quarter seems to be a bare minimum, where, if you and I have a couple beers, that's way better than 50 Zoom calls.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, some of my best connections in commercial real estate have been people I met once in person.
Yep. Yep.
I do Zoom calls with people all the time, but it's not the same. And the tough part about remote work is you might finish for the day. You think you're finished for the day. You have dinner. A couple ideas pop in your head. You're like, all right, I can just work for a half hour. It's like sometimes it's just good to get it, put it away till the next day, come up with a fresh brain. So we're not like in this half attentive state all the time. Because we have our laptop at home, and that's your office. So yeah, having a separation is good. But again, the personal responsibility thing, you got to make rules for yourself. It's like, am I done work? Am I gonna work some hours tonight? It's like, just make a decision either way. So
Yeah, the trade-off, sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
The trade-off with remote work is, you're right, is accountability. So my presentation has more to do with not life-work balance, but because of remote work, it's life-work integration. And if you give yourself significance in yourself, because I find a lot of people get burned out because they kind of lose their significance in themselves, and they just kind of get isolated. Not that they're lonely necessarily, but they kind of lose touch back to your human connection.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have an integrated life, because like you said, are you really done with work? It's not like this 8 to 5 thing and I'm done. You might have to go do some personal stuff during the day. That means you might have to write some appraisals at 9 o'clock at night. So it does become, I think it's actually quite frankly, a little bit harder, because you have to be very autonomous with your time and your management of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, all the stuff we talked about, yeah, there's a lot of issues, but I think the path forward is clearer than we make it out to be as an appraisal profession. So I think there are solutions that, we're going to be here in the long term, and we just have to lean on each other a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Brendan, I really appreciate your time today, and great chat.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.